You are listening to the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast with your ADHD coach and expert, Zena. Hello, my friend. Welcome back. We're navigating some adult ADHD today. That is what we're here for. Thank you for pushing play. I am so happy to have you here with me for what I feel like is going to be a very vulnerable topic, shall we say. But before we get into it, I wanted to let you know that in true ADHD fashion, I forgot to take my ADHD meds at the regular time today, which means they have not yet kicked in. So this could be fun. This could be an interesting episode, and maybe partway through you notice when they, flood my system and all of a sudden I just take off. Who knows? Isn't it funny though that, ADHD meds are considered something that is highly addictive. Ritalin and Adderall is used as a study drug. So it's abused by people and used to stay up late studying, etc. However, those of us with ADHD, we can forget to take our medication. The irony in that is just not lost in me. All right, so ADHD can show up in the bedroom. That's what we're talking about today. For some people, this could look like having a really high sex drive. It could be making impulsive decisions that you later regret. It could be risky behaviour. For others, it can also look like the other end of the spectrum, being really low libido or getting bored easily. It could also include sensory overwhelm in the bedroom, which we're going to dive into, or just feeling really disconnected from your partner or even from yourself. And because sex is a very vulnerable topic, these things can come with a lot of shame. So this episode today isn't about blaming ADHD for everything that happens in our sex lives. It's definitely not about using ADHD as a free pass for any behavior that hurts other people, but it is really about understanding how our ADHD patterns can show up around sex, around desire, around intimacy, so that we can bring some more awareness and honesty and also a lot less shame into the bedroom, okay? Because the reality is ADHD doesn't just affect our emails or our laundry or our time management or our ability to remember why we walked into a room. Okay, it does also affect our relationships. It can impact our desire, our communication, our ability to stay present, our need for novelty, our sensitivity to rejection, our impulsivity, our shame, and yes, ADHD can also impact our sex life. Which feels a bit awkward to talk about, I know. If I'm being honest with you, I have wanted to do this topic probably for a year, but I didn't feel, it's not that I didn't feel comfortable, I didn't feel in the right space to do it alone. And I did look for like a sex therapist or some sort of an expert in this space, and I didn't find anyone that I really resonated with to bring on. So I decided to spend some time researching it, and we're doing it. Okay? But do I feel a little awkward? Yes, I do. I do, having this conversation with you. I really do. But I also think it is so important, so we're going to do it anyway. Right? Because when we don't talk about things like these sorts of things, we tend to make them mean something terrible about us. We think, well, what's wrong with me? Why do I want sex all the time? Or why don't I want sex at all? Why do I get bored in the bedroom? Why do I chase attention? Why do I struggle to stay present? Why do I make that decision? Why can't I just be normal? And as always, shame loves a dark room. So we're going to turn a lamp on and we're going to unpack all of this together, my friend. Okay? So first of all, I want to explain two terms that come up a lot in the ADHD research around sex and intimacy. They also come up in many articles online, many chat rooms, that sort of thing, when we're talking about ADHD and sex. So that is hypersexuality. That's one of the terms. And the other one is hyposexuality. So hypersexuality basically means a higher or more intense interest in sex. So that might look like thinking about sex a lot, wanting sex often, seeking sexual stimulation, using sex or sexual attention for dopamine, or feeling like you have these strong sexual urges that are just like really, really loud and really hard to switch off. Okay. Now, hyposexuality is basically the opposite of that. So that means a low sexual desire or like very little interest in sex. That might look like you really don't think about it very often. You're just not wanting it. Perhaps you feel very disconnected from desire. You avoid intimacy, or you just feel like your sex drive has kind of packed a suitcase and left the building. Now, the tricky thing is that ADHD can show up in either direction. So, again, we can be very all or nothing. So some ADHDers experience a really high sex drive, and some are down the other end of the spectrum and have a very low sex drive. Now, some swing in between both depending on stress, on hormones, on burnout, relationship dynamics, medication. Yes, medication can impact this, right? Mood, novelty, safety, resentment, or whatever else is happening in your life. So, as always, this is definitely not a one-size-fits-all conversation, because ADHD can affect the systems that sit underneath sex, right? Underneath whatever's happening in the bedroom. ADHD impacts our attention, our dopamine, our impulse control, our emotional regulation, our sensory processing, motivation, rejection sensitivity, communication. And once you understand that, a lot of things start to make more sense. So we got a lot to cover, my friend. Strap in. I don't know that necessarily was a good choice of words. If you're like dirty-minded like me, you're like, oh my God, Zena, stop it. But hey, it's the right episode for it, let's be honest. All right, moving right along. Let's start with novelty. Because novelty is like, I think of it like brain glitter, right? Brain glitter. It's just such a cute visual for me. Love it. Novelty. Novelty might be a new person, a new relationship, new attention, new messages, new flirting, a new body to explore, new chemistry, new validation, new dopamine source. So novelty is very stimulating for an ADHD brain. Now, this shows up especially in the early ages of a relationship. So there's the attraction when everything feels exciting, when there's a lot of like uncertainty and unknown, and it's kind of like you're exploring a new place. It's very exciting. Are they going to text me back? Do they like me? Ooh, what does that mean? Like, are we flirting? Is this actually a thing? Right? And suddenly your brain is like wide awake and it's kind of wearing a party hat, checking your phone every few seconds because of this novelty, the stimulation, this excitement. Okay, all of that dopamine is being produced. And for some ADHDers, and this was definitely me in my relationship, that early stage can feel intoxicating. It's kind of like a drug. Because novelty gives the ADHD brain something very powerful to latch onto. It gives us interest. It gives us reward. It gives us anticipation. It gives us the dopamine. It gives us the chase. It ticks so many boxes for our ADHD brains. So many. Now, the tricky bit here is what happens when things become familiar, right? In long-term relationships, they're not built on constant novelty. They're really built on safety, on trust, on repetition, on doing life together, right? In a long-term relationship, you know what your partner is going to order from the takeaway menu before they even open it. And that can be a beautiful, wonderful thing. But it can also feel a lot less stimulating, a lot less interesting, perhaps even boring. So sometimes once a relationship becomes that safe and predictable relationship, an ADHDer might start to think, why don't I feel as excited anymore? Why am I so bored with this person? Why am I not desiring them like I used to? Does this mean I'm not attracted to them? Does this mean that there's something wrong with our relationship? Now, maybe. Sometimes relationships are not the right fit. Like sometimes the disconnection is real. But, sometimes it's not that there is anything necessarily wrong with the relationship. Sometimes it's that the dopamine has changed. The newness has worn off. The chase is gone. The mystery has settled. The novelty has disappeared. And now your brain is being asked to find desire, to find novelty inside this safe, familiar relationship, which can feel very different. So I've actually seen this talked about in a lot of the ADHD spaces, people saying things like, I love my partner, but I get really bored. Or sex was amazing at the start, but now I just can't get interested. Or I feel awful because they haven't done anything wrong. And another one that comes up a lot is, I keep chasing crushes or attention outside of my relationship because it makes me feel alive. And this is where I really want us to pause for a minute and get curious, because boredom does not always mean that a relationship is broken. Sometimes that boredom or that lack of, interest and novelty means that your brain just needs a little bit of stimulation. Sometimes it means, hey, you need more emotional connection. Maybe it means you're just understimulated in your life and you're expecting your relationship to provide all of the sparkle. And sometimes it does mean sex has become way too predictable, too boring perhaps. Sometimes it means that there's resentment sitting under the surface, ruining the vibe. Sometimes it means that you just need to talk about what actually works for you, instead of performing what you think should be happening in the bedroom or should be happening in a relationship. And honestly, sometimes it means that you need to get creative, and we do have, we're creative humans, right? Neurodivergent humans, we are naturally very creative. Sometimes it means we need to get creative in how can we bring some play or perhaps some honesty or some communication or some variety into this relationship. And that's not by blowing things up, because we've got to be honest here. Yes, picking a fight is stimulating for an ADHD brain. Ask me how I know. Yes, I will pick a fight because it produces dopamine, okay? But I want to encourage us to avoid that, right? But also sneaking around, going behind our partner's back, doing things, chasing dopamine outside of our values, that is something else that is quite common in the ADHD world. But instead, this is an opportunity for us to recognize what's actually going on, that we're seeking dopamine and novelty and stimulation. And we have the opportunity to have a really honest conversation with our partner. And perhaps even if it will help, listen to this episode together. Go right through it by yourself now. And then perhaps it will help for them to better understand you and where you're coming from if you were to listen to it together and pause and have conversation along the way. Maybe that would be helpful. Okay. But again, just having an honest conversation about what's happening for you in your brain, it can be such a beautiful place to start. So now let's talk about impulsivity. Oh yeah, because ADHD impulsivity can absolutely show up when it comes to all things sex and intimacy. And I also think that this is where we need to be really kind and really honest with ourselves, because impulsivity might look like saying yes before you check in with yourself and if this decision aligns with you and your values, right? It could look like sexting someone because it feels exciting in the moment. And maybe you are in a relationship, maybe you're not. Maybe it seems like sending the message, aka dick pic, that you know is probably not a good idea, right? Maybe it looks like getting totally swept up in a crush, or flirting for a dopamine hit, or moving way too quickly, or having unsafe sex, or watching porn in a way that starts to feel really compulsive or addictive or secretive even. It can also look like cheating, right? Impulsivity can also be, chasing that spark before really thinking through the consequences of the actions, for sure. And then afterwards, what often happens is the shame spiral, the, emotional hangover. Why did I do that? What's wrong with me? I've ruined everything. I can't trust myself. I'm a terrible person. And I want to make a really clear distinction here. ADHD might explain why we feel the urge really loudly, like why that urge to do whatever we did feels, extreme or fast or harder to sort of interrupt, okay? ADHD for sure can explain that. And we still have to take responsibility for what we do with that, what we do when we feel that way, okay? As I have said many a time on this podcast, ADHD is an explanation, but it's not an excuse. ADHD can explain the impulsivity. It can explain the dopamine seeking. It might also explain why attention or validation feels so powerful. It can also explain why that pause button is so hard for us to find. But it also doesn't erase the impact that we can have on another person. It does not give us a free pass to hurt people, all right? And I know that it can be really hard to hear when you're like already sitting in shame. I totally get that. I wish you could see me right now, because when I'm like feeling so much compassion and understanding for someone, and my clients will know this, I always have my hand on my chest and I'm like rubbing it, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I just like want to rub you and like rub your back and just hold you, right? That's my vibe. But I'm doing that right now. You just can't tell. But as I was saying, right, like our ADHD doesn't give us, a free pass. And again, that can be hard when we feel a lot of shame for things that we have done. But responsibility and shame are not the same thing. Shame tells us that, we are bad. We're a bad person. So there's just no point, right? I'm never going to change. That's what shame tells us. But responsibility is very different, because that says, I did something that caused harm and I need to understand that. I want to understand that. I want to own it. I want to repair where I can. And I also want to put better supports in place for myself. And that is very different energy. Okay. Honesty is just, a very powerful, useful place to come from. But shame, it does not help us to change. Okay. It just makes us want to hide. So if you are in the camp of having made some impulsive decisions and done some impulsive things that you may be regretting or feeling badly about, I want to offer you some questions, some really powerful questions to explore. Okay. Starting with, when am I more likely to make impulsive sexual decisions that I later regret? So when am I more likely to do that? Is it when I feel rejected? Is it when I'm drinking? Is it when I'm bored? Is it when I'm lonely, when I'm angry, when I feel unwanted? Is it when I'm really deeply craving validation? Or is it when my own relationship feels really flat? I go looking elsewhere. Is it when I'm just feeling really dysregulated and I look for something to make me feel better in the moment? That information, that understanding really matters. Okay? Not so you can beat yourself over the head with it. No, my friend, no, please. So that you can better support yourself, right? So you can put some supports in place. Because if you know your risky moments, you can create guardrails, right? Maybe you don't message that person when you're drinking. You delete their number from your phone, okay? Maybe you don't keep feeding that flirtation that you know is really crossing a line. Maybe you ask your coworker to help you with that because they know what's going on, right? Maybe you get support from a therapist if this is a repeated pattern. And I'm actually going to talk about therapy a little bit later on, because I myself have had some experiences with therapy. Now, let's talk about distraction, because this is one that I think, so many of us likely experience, definitely from the conversations that I have had with people and my own experience. Many of us can struggle to stay present during sex. And again, this can come with a lot of shame. You might really love your partner. You might be really attracted to them. You might want to be there, but your brain can't stop thinking about everything else. Did I reply to that email? What time is that appointment tomorrow? Why is the ceiling looking like that? Is my body weird at this angle? Are they enjoying this? How long has this been going on for? Should I be making more noise? What are we having for dinner? Did I move the laundry? Did I put it in the dryer? Oh my gosh. And then you notice you're distracted, and now you're distracted by being distracted. Welcome to having ADHD, my friend. For some ADHDers, sex can be the only place that they feel fully present. Again, this can be a very all or nothing spectrum. Okay, for others, staying present is hard, really hard, unless there is enough stimulation, novelty, safety, maybe pressure, communication, emotional connection. Okay, if your brain is understimulated, if it's overwhelmed, anxious, bored, feeling a lot of pressure, if you're not feeling safe, it can quite likely wander. Not because you don't care, but because that's what our ADHD brains do. They wander. They scan, they look for stimulation, they get pulled off by thoughts, they notice the cat in the corner, they remember, oh shit, that dentist appointment I forgot about. And suddenly they're deeply concerned about doing the laundry. So instead of making that mean something awful about ourselves, meaning something's wrong in our relationship, we get to ask, okay, what helps me come back into my body? Maybe it's music, maybe it's less light. Maybe it's communication. Maybe it's slowing down. Maybe it's changing up what you're doing, how you're doing it. You get what I'm trying to say, right? Maybe it's more novelty, having a shower first, right? Having a shower for me, I know it definitely helps my brain to slow down. So that could be a great option if you're experiencing this, right? Maybe it's making the bedroom less visually chaotic because that visual overwhelm is real. Maybe it's needing more transition time instead of, being expected to go from emails to intimacy in 4.5 seconds. Okay. So this also brings us to the sensory stuff. And I hadn't really thought about this, if I'm being honest. I hadn't really thought about the sensory impact of, our ADHD, our sensory needs, and how that could show up in the bedroom. But there was a lot that I uncovered in the research, and this was actually very, very interesting, because the reality is that sensory needs can absolutely affect sex and intimacy. So somebody touching you might feel really good one day and then deeply annoying the next, right? Light touch, for some people, it might make your skin crawl. Certain smells might be off-putting. Noise can be really distracting, right? Too much heat can be unbearable. The wrong texture can ruin everything. And that can, again, really distract you, really take you elsewhere, out of the moment, out of your ability to enjoy the experience that you're having with your partner. You might need pressure, you might need space, you might need darkness, you might need your brain not to be staring at a pile of laundry in the corner. Now, again, that does not mean we're high maintenance. It means that our nervous system has preferences. And my friend, those preferences are allowed to matter. And I think so many of us have spent years trying to override our needs. This was for sure me, right? Trying to be easy, trying to be chill, trying to be normal, trying not to inconvenience anyone. But at the end of the day, intimacy requires honesty. Being honest about what we like, what we don't like, what we need more of, or what we need less of. And that starts with us first understanding that. So exploring your own sensory needs is such a great place to start. And let's be real, if we're being really honest here, this kind of communication can feel awkward, okay? But awkward is allowed, okay? Awkward is not a failure. When you feel awkward, it's not a problem that has to be solved. I feel pretty good now, but I felt pretty awkward as it came to start recording this episode. I was feeling awkward, my friend. And that's okay, right? In this context, when we're feeling awkward talking about, sex and intimacy and communicating with our partner and asking for what we need, I just want to offer that is something to be proud of, because you're actually doing it. You are having your own back. You're speaking up for yourself, advocating for yourself and your needs. And at the same time, you are advocating for your relationship. So I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you if you're doing it. I'm proud of you. So now let's talk about low libido, okay? Because ADHD can also show up as not wanting sex. And I think that this is something that people can feel incredibly ashamed about, especially if their partner wants sex more often. Or perhaps even if sex used to feel really easy and now it doesn't, or if they feel like they should want it, there can be some shame around that. But low libido can actually happen for so many different reasons. There's burnout, overwhelm, stress, hormones, medication, yes, ADHD medication, as well as other medication that we could be on, perhaps for anxiety or depression, that can also impact your libido, your sex drive, okay? Poor sleep, body image, sensory overload, resentment, relationship disconnection, right? If you feel like sex has just become another thing that you're failing at. Again, low libido can happen for so many reasons. And for an ADHD brain, the second something starts to feel like a demand, it can definitely lose its sparkle very quickly. Now, even if you technically want to want it, sex can go from something, connecting and pleasurable to another thing on your to-do list. So my friend, if you relate to having low libido, rather than asking what is wrong with me, you might want to ask some different questions. Remember, change the question, change the answer. What is getting in the way of this desire? Am I exhausted? Am I resentful? Am I overwhelmed? Do I feel emotionally connected? Am I just feeling a lot of pressure? Maybe do I need more transition time? Do I need some intimacy that doesn't always automatically lead to sex? Sometimes rebuilding intimacy means taking the pressure and the expectations off the table. It can mean allowing closeness without it having to always turn into sex. It means remembering that intimacy is more than just sex and what happens in the bedroom, okay? Intimacy requires us to feel emotionally safe. It's being listened to. It's being seen. It's laughing together. It's repair after conflict. It's affection. It's honesty. It's being able to say no without punishment. It's being able to say yes without pressure. It's asking for what works. It's caring about the other person's experience. It is connection, okay? And for us ADHDers, intimacy can be affected by all the usual ADHD stuff. Forgetting, interrupting, not listening properly, getting defensive, avoiding hard conversations, emotional outbursts, rejection sensitivity, feeling like we're being criticized, feeling like we're always failing. And sometimes this can mean that our partner ends up feeling unwanted or ignored, or like they only matter when us, the ADHDer, when we are interested. And we can end up feeling ashamed. We can feel a lot of pressure, or we can feel really misunderstood, or like we're constantly in trouble or not good enough. So both of us can be hurting. One person feels rejected, the other person feels inadequate. One person wants closeness, the other feels too much pressure. One person, pursues, the other person withdraws. I see this all the time, okay? And then suddenly nobody feels very sexy, do they? So this, again, is why communication matters so much. And I know. Communication, everybody's favorite piece of advice to throw around, and it sounds so simple, but it's not. Just communicate sounds a lot to me, like just try harder. Okay, sure, lovely. Shall I also just, fold this fitted sheet and become a morning person? No. When we talk about communication, it does not have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be polished. It doesn't have to be some relationship summit. It starts small. Communication can sound like, hey, I've noticed I get in my head around sex and I really want to start understanding that better, right? Like I get in my head and I kind of check out and I just want to understand that. Or, hey, I think pressure is really making me shut down. Or I think sometimes I'm really chasing novelty when I'm feeling flat. Like, how could we perhaps add a little bit more novelty into this? Or it might sound like, hey, I'm feeling really rejected every time I initiate and you say no. And like, I make that mean that you don't want me and I'm feeling terrible. Right? communication can sound like, I want to talk about what helps us both feel connected in this relationship or connected in the bedroom. Okay. Maybe it sounds like, hey, I love you and I think ADHD affects this area more than I realized. When it comes to communication, there are a couple of things I have 100% learned the hard way. And also the research, of course, backs this up. But the best time to have these kinds of conversations, these really intimate, personal conversations, is not in the moment. 100% not in the moment. It's not when, you've just had an argument. It's not when someone just initiated something, and it's not when somebody else said no. When you're triggered, when one person's half naked, it's not the time for this, okay? Trust me. We want to have these conversations. We want to practice this skill of communicating when we're regulated. Okay, so really good times to do this is on a walk, if you're on a walk together, in the car, right, when you're driving, over coffee, somewhere less intense, all right? And again, like the goal of communicating is simply understanding. It's not blame. It's not placing blame anywhere. It's just understanding. And again, this episode is not about trying to give us another reason to feel broken or bad about ourselves. This episode is solely about understanding and awareness. It's about noticing our patterns, like understanding and becoming aware of how ADHD shows up in the bedroom and in our, sex lives and in regards to intimacy. So here are some patterns that you might recognize. Maybe you love the chase more than the relationship. Maybe you feel bored once sex becomes familiar. Maybe you use flirting or sexual attention to feel wanted. Maybe you get impulsive when you feel rejected. Maybe you say yes before even checking in with yourself. Maybe you say no because the pressure just feels like too much. Maybe you want sex if it feels spontaneous, but you shut down when it feels expected. Maybe you often get distracted during sex. Maybe you need more novelty than you thought. Maybe you need more safety than you thought. Maybe you need sensory things to be different. Maybe your desire disappears when life becomes overwhelming. Maybe you're not actually avoiding sex. Maybe you're avoiding guilt or pressure or rejection or feeling like you're just failing at one more thing. And if you recognize yourself in any of this, you are not alone, my friend. In fact, you're actually in very good company. We get it around here, okay? And if this is causing you real distress or perhaps repeated betrayal, compulsive behavior, unsafe situations, trauma responses, or relationship pain that you just cannot untangle alone, please, 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 please get some support. A therapist, it could be a sex therapist, a couples therapist, a doctor, or any qualified professional who can help. On a personal note, my therapist, who I want to point out is incredibly ADHD aware, she's very supportive of neurodivergent humans. She has helped me hugely with things like all things sex and intimacy, things that have, popped up in my relationship. And having this person, outside of our relationship who is kind and non-judgmental and professional, but she's in my corner and helping me to unpack these things and work through them has been an absolute game changer. And I want to offer that. This could be an absolute game changer for you, for your relationship, for your relationship with sex and intimacy, whether or not you're with someone. Okay? So my friend, to bring this home, ADHD can and does affect sex and intimacy in many different ways. It can show up as wanting sex all the time, or the other end of the scale, not wanting sex at all. It can show up with us getting bored in the bedroom, chasing novelty, being distracted, feeling overwhelmed by all of the different sensory things, making impulsive choices, feeling rejected, feeling pressured, avoiding conversations, feeling ashamed. These are patterns that are so worth understanding. And the more we understand these patterns, the more choice that we have. We've got the choice to pause, to communicate, to ask for what we need and what works once we start to sort of explore that and understand it better for ourselves. We've got the choice to take responsibility, the choice to create intimacy that actually works for us, that fits our brain, our body, our values. Whew. All right, my friend, we got vulnerable together today. Yes, we did. This is, I'm sure, a topic that we will revisit again because I feel like we barely scratched the surface today. But I so appreciate you being here as we have unpacked this conversation around sex and intimacy. All right. Thank you again. Huge, huge, huge love to you. Take care. I'll speak to you next week. Hey friend, if you want some more help navigating and thriving with ADHD and some help applying everything that you're learning here on the podcast, then head over to our website, navigatingadultadhd.com.